Okay, Rosemary, I'm really excited to get some time with you because you're currently sitting at an epic farm that you purchased, and this was not your background. You come from the financial professionals services industry, specifically finance, and you've been through quite a journey to buy this farm, and I think it's a perfect opportunity to talk about it. Do a quick intro on where you're at right now, but take us back to your journey to buying this business, buying this farm, doing it smartly with leverage, tax optimized, and with a super growth mindset, which is a key part of it too. All the things that we'll get into. Rosemary, welcome, and give us an introduction.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm really excited to be here and grateful for the opportunity. I am a proprietor of Livingstone Farm 1860. I'm currently in the farmhouse. As you can see, old stone walls that were actually built in 1860. So, 150, 160 years ago. This building is still standing. I have the most beautiful farmhouse that I love and adore spending time in, and also serves as a cash flow generator for the farm. So, on farms right now, situation is agricultural businesses generally don't make up the cash flow to be able to support large purchases. So we're all running separate businesses apart from that, which I'll get a little bit more into. Background wise, I have been a professional in finance for more than 10 years, and in wealth management was the place that I really cut my teeth. I was an investment advisor for a number of years, a portfolio manager, ran my own book for 7 years. I have business partners now who are taking care of almost all of that. So I don't need to be in meetings or, really involved in the day to day, which is a huge blessing. And throughout that process of working in an office in downtown Toronto every day, when I first started, we were literally chained to our desks. I had to ask a friend if they would watch the phone while I went to the washroom and make sure that during market hours and trading hours, we were around and available and close to our phones within seconds of putting in trades and all of that. Honestly took a toll on me, and I think it would on anyone. And I couldn't really see that there was another way to do life professionally at the time until the pandemic hit, which was actually a huge blessing for everyone who worked in finance because we all got to work from home for the first time, probably.
Totally.
And that's really when I discovered that I could actually continue to do some professional services from home, which made the opportunity for my lifelong dream of having a farm and living on one to be a reality that I could see in the near future. Now we're here.
And now we're here. Wow. Talk about the the transition from running a services business to buying a farm, and obviously you need to be very well, tax optimized, and your financial house has to be in order to be bankable. So, what was the process for if you got leverage to buy the business? How did you find the business? And mentally, how did you start to make the transition?
Yeah, there was a specific day where I was driving in Waterloo, Ontario, which is where I went to university. And I took this route down this really beautiful, kind of like a highway, pretty fast road, but not a freeway. And I remembered 10 years before, I drove down the same highway, sunroof open, probably listening to Natasha Bedingfield Unwritten or something like that, and just loving that area and saying to myself, I want to buy farmland here. This is so beautiful. And I could see like myself with the window, with the coffee and the rolling hills. And I was just so attached to this dream. But obviously, I had no money. I was in university, no way to do this. So fast forward 10 years later, driving down the same road, and I'm looking around and I realize at the exact point that I wanted that farmland is now completely converted to subdivision. And something really sunk in my heart where I realized, what I wanted is obviously no longer ever going to be what it was. And then I started to think through, like, if this is going to be something that I'm going to have in the future, how long am I going to wait to actually do that? And if I do wait a really long time until I'm 50 or 60 years old and retired, is what I want still going to be available? And, or is it going to be a subdivision? And in that moment, I just decided, if all the farmland around Toronto or within an hour of the city is going to be a subdivision, at least it'll be my subdivision. And it's time that I start to move on this right now.
Mm-hmm.
So at that moment is when I decided I'm doing the farm. And this had always been a dream of mine. But at that point, I just started to pull it closer and realize like, if I wait on my dreams, they're going to be harder to achieve down the road.
Mm.
Unlikely that I'll end up getting the same things that I wanted, and realizing that I actually deserve it, which is why I should run after it right now. There's no reason to put off enjoying your life or fulfilling your dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So in that moment, I decided that was it. And that's when the real search started. So to be able to buy a farm, first of all, and I'd already had a residential home property, so I already had a mortgage. I had really, really great income, which was fantastic for qualifying for additional lending. But to actually get a farm, it's not the same as a residential mortgage. It's not just buying a house. And when you already have a property, now you're into a second property mode, things get more complicated. At that point, I started searching for lenders,
Mm-hmm.
and I found lenders who specifically lend on farms. I started to think through my criteria. What do I truly want? What's really important to me about this in terms of location, size, what we're growing, what kind of farm I have, um, a number of other things in that nature, how it was going to cash flow. And in addition to that, throughout the process, tax becomes extremely important to manage. So, just to kind of throw out some numbers here, and I'm not a huge fan of throwing out my own personal financial numbers, but
Sure.
I will in this case because I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's important and valuable to know.
Mm-hmm.
After I had gotten my lender sorted, who actually lends on farms and is really encouraging long term of farm lending,
Mm-hmm.
I started looking into how I was going to actually get this deal done and the mechanics of this business structure. And in the mechanics of the business structure, when I was working with my tax consultant and my own research, I realized that if you buy a commercial property personally, you have to pay HST. And HST at the time in Ontario is 13%.
Mm-hmm.
So when I bought the property and it was 3.3 million, 13% of that is looking pretty close to
Mm-hmm.
$400,000,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a little bit more. So if you buy something personally, you're paying $400,000 in addition. And like, where's that money going to come from?
Yeah.
Anybody who's buying a farm is scrounging on a down payment, especially if you already have a residential property.
Mm-hmm.
So I found a loophole in the tax system
Mm-hmm.
where if you buy a commercial property and you are also a commercial business, meaning through a corporation, then there's an offset in the HST and nobody needs to pay it.
Amazing.
And in that moment, I just saved 13% of $3.3 million on top of the purchase price.
Right. Huge.
So this is like a really basic concept that you need to know. Like you need to know these things. And if you don't know them, you're just setting yourself back. And ultimately, I don't even know if I've been able to move forward. I don't just have $400,000 laying around. That would have been like my entire
Right.
renovation budget plus more to clean up this place.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's huge. So, I mean, that's I'm happy you found that hack and makes perfect sense. So thanks for sharing. With qualifying, and if it's like residential, whether you buy under yourself or a corporate property, the lenders look at purely your income pretty much. If it is like a commercial asset that has a cap rate and it's really its own thing, they don't care about your income. Actually, they care about your credit score, minimum down payment, net worth, but they're more about, does the asset serve debt service itself, and usually is that above 1.1, right, in terms of like income divided by expenses. So was it commercially underwritten or residentially underwritten, just to clarify?
It was, I think it was a mixture of both.
Hmm.
So the way that the details worked when it
Mm-hmm.
came to value and actually purchasing the farm. When I worked with the farm lenders, they essentially go through the process of evaluating the land, what it can generate, all of that. They want to look at what type of farm business that you're running.
Right.
So they do underwrite from a commercial standpoint. They'll understand what the value is of the financial means that you can bring to the table in that business.
Hmm.
But they also do need to know that you can sustain it financially if you're not covering cash flow wise from your agricultural business.
Got it. Yeah, of course. And how does the agricultural business work, and how else what are the different little cash flow systems in this beautiful asset?
Yeah. The as I mentioned in my intro, agricultural businesses almost never actually cover even the cost of a mortgage on farmland in good areas. So
Hmm.
they may cover in like Northern Ontario or Saskatchewan or Manitoba or something like that. Once you get an hour or two from a really big city, you're not covering. Everyone knows there's a potential for development land here, so prices increase substantially per acre.
Mm.
So in that case, when commodity values stay the same, you now have a much higher cost to produce the same amount of commodities as other farmers do.
Hmm.
In the area that I'm in, there's a lot of what we call cash crop, which would be a rotation between soybeans, corn, and wheat. And usually farmers rotate them one after the other after the other. They go wheat, corn, soy, so that they don't degrade the value of the soil or the nutrients
Mm.
in there. And you can choose to either manage that farm business, agricultural business yourself. You can contract out the work to farmers, meaning you pay them for their time. You can share in a partnership with a farmer. So now you have like a 50-50 split somehow,
Mm.
or you can actually just lease your land to a farmer.
Hmm.
Now, the original agreement that was already in place when I purchased the property was a lease agreement. So we would get paid on an acre, dollar per acre at the beginning of this farm inception that was already in place. So the lenders already knew that, they could see that, they have invoices, all of it. What
Hmm.
I realized over time is and this is a big part of my life. Like I've worked in the investment business. I'm one of the biggest risk takers anyone will probably meet, despite being a chick. I know a
Hmm.
lot of people don't look at me and think you're the
Hmm.
biggest risk taker I've
Hmm.
ever met,
Interesting.
but very likely am.
Hmm.
And I just talked to my farmer and I said, hey, I'm cool with whatever risk it's going to take. Where do you think I'm going to make the most money?
Hmm.
So we got into the details on how we could share crop part of our property and then how we could custom contract out and own the actual crop. And that's what I ended up doing. So we
Huh.
converted over about a 3-year period from cash crop that was rented land. So I was a landlord leasing to a farmer
Hmm.
to a shared agreement, which was a partnership, to 100% ownership myself. And
Hmm.
now I grow premium forage, which is forage meaning hay that gets consumed by horses, particularly in horse country in Wellington, Florida. There's a
Wow.
very specific export agreement by my farmer, who is the most incredible, helpful person who I've been partnered with. And I'm essentially his supplier. So he sells premium forage that I have to a bunch of horse show participants in Florida. And that's how we make the most money off the land.
Wild.
That was long. I have to also
Wild.
say
Hmm.
that the farmhouse that I'm in right now is uh, like a short-term rental bed and breakfast
Right.
style place.
Hmm. Hmm.
The entire place gets rented out at once. It's not a bed and breakfast where
Hmm.
you can book a room and you'd have to share a bathroom with people. I think that's just gross and weird. And I would never show up somewhere like that.
Right.
Um, and this is actually the big money maker on the property in terms of cash flow to be
Hmm.
able to, especially in the summer months, be able to cover like almost all the costs of the property. We have a pool, we got the hot tub, we have a barn,
Nice.
there's chickens. I do meat chickens, we sell eggs. Um,
Mm.
there's lots going on out here, but the two big things are agricultural, which is the hay business that I have right now, and the bed and breakfast operating in the house.
Love that. Wow. So someone buying a farm, they can definitely be creative and look at repositioning it, such as for an Airbnb business, obviously. And I guess you probably just sort of started to figure out the different ways to monetize the actual farm as you were in it. I assume you did some pre-planning before you bought it around the potential, but how much did you actually learn after you bought the place versus your projections of what you're going to do before you bought? Like, there's definitely some, I think, I mean, it looks like some positive learning versus like, oh, what have I got myself into? Like, what was the gap between, what you thought you would do and then what you actually did? Like the niche Florida thing seems I don't know. Was that actually something you knew about before, or did you figure that out once you got to know your farmer? Seems like the latter.
Figured out once we got to know the farmer. I
Right.
generally come into things and can assess the value at the moment, but my goal is always what's the maximum profit that we can run here.
Yeah.
And that's very important to me. Like if he had said, the maximum profit we can run here is going to be cattle and I'll take care of it, I would have said, okay.
Right.
It's really just, I don't really care that much about the details. I
Sure.
care about how are we going to maximize? Maximizing is like my number one thing.
Totally.
Um, on that note of maximizing, when
Hmm.
it comes to taxes and tax planning around the farm, these
Hmm.
are very important things to know. Even if an agricultural business isn't making very much money, if you're making, let's say, $9,000 a year revenue, so could be negative profit.
Hmm.
In the area that I'm in, you're eligible for a 75% discount on your property taxes for your entire property.
Hmm.
So my farm is 115 acres with like a 4,000 square foot beautiful farmhouse, the pool, the barns, all that stuff. And my property tax are the same as my 1,000 square foot home in Etobicoke, which is close to Toronto in Ontario.
Wild.
Tiny lot, corner lot, same tax. So if you're running an agricultural business, you're probably saving money in taxes just by running an unprofitable agricultural business.
Hmm.
Secondly, when you have a bed and breakfast or you have a short term rental Airbnb, everything that goes into it becomes a write off. I'm looking at Miss Mayer's Clean Day counter multi surface spray.
Hmm.
That is a write off. I'm looking at knives. I'm looking at paper towel, tin foil, a coffee maker, coffee, oven mitts, egg containers, a fridge, all of those things become part of the overall farm business
Hmm.
or the Airbnb business or your bed and breakfast business.
Sure.
And then ultimately can really be a massive advantage compared to not having a write off.
Well, totally. And if I guess so, the alternative, someone buys the farm, it's owner occupied, and there's no real business side to it, or you can't write it off if you're just owner occupying and just running a small part of it as business, or what makes it be a write off? Just what's a mistake people can make here to not get the write offs? Is just not have any business operated? How is a hobby farm, or can you still get write offs if you're just running one small lever, let alone the Airbnb and everything else?
Yeah, so I would say if you're running a hobby farm, you're probably not making the threshold of $9,000 a year revenue to be able to get the property tax reclass on the farmland.
Right.
When it comes to Airbnbs and bed and breakfasts, it can't really be your house if
Hmm.
you are not open year round to be able to run a rental. Like you're essentially running a rental. So these can't be things that you're purchasing for your own personal use. They need to be able to be justified for the use of your actual business.
Got it.
So cleaning is a huge part of Airbnb and bed and breakfasts.
Hmm.
And I think that cleaning products would be a very good use of business funds because that
Of
directly
course.
contributes to how you're going to run your business. If you're just owner occupying the house, how are you going to justify that cleaning products are part of your business? I don't think you can.
Got it. So it's declared as a rental from day one, and you've got different levers, and I mean, it's also owned by an opco or maybe a holdco, so it's very clear
Yeah.
that it's a business, and
Yeah.
yeah, the whole thing's right off and run like a business basically, which was the goal. And sure, you can also happen to use it as a patron and do user testing on it, and that's all fine, right? Obviously, like, but the main purpose is it's a business. So there's a tax write off in terms of so you want to be making above 9,000, below, or what? This clarification on the
Above
threshold.
nine for your farm. So you
Yeah,
need to have 9,000 of farming income, which could be variety of things. It could be crops, it could be sales of eggs, it could be farm stand sales, it could
got it.
be sales of livestock.
We're talking like under $1,000 a month. So just off a good egg business, I would assume. I would hope that'll get you there. But you just have to be intentional with that, and that's incentive for you to like produce farming, and it's a credit in terms of they want to incentivize you to like do what a farm is best meant to do, but that threshold seems pretty low, so that's pretty doable. And then you're making your real money from what you mentioned with the wholesaling to Florida. You got the Airbnb business. I mean, I'm sure there's weddings there. And are there retreats that are also run on there specifically through you, through other facilitators, through corporations?
Yes.
Talk about the retreat part of it because that's in these
I
days.
love the retreat part. My favorite thing to do is to run retreats. I
Mm-hmm.
have so much interest in entrepreneurs, particularly a mix between men and women who are
Mm-hmm.
business owners who want to be in masterminds and retreats with other entrepreneurs who are equally or similarly successful
Mm-hmm.
and just get away for a couple days. We all know when you step away from your business, you can see things a lot more clearly because you're not as in it.
Yeah.
And I find that retreats are really valuable for that. Also, we all encourage each other to think a little bit differently, which is sometimes what I need to get unstuck. So, retreat
Mm-hmm.
wise, I do lead and run retreats and would love to have more business owners and more entrepreneurs be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, we have a number of clients who rent out the property to run retreats as well with the bed and breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really successful. I get some of the most incredible social media um, content from people who've run really fantastic retreats. We do set everything up really well. We
Mm-hmm.
have, private local chef who can do farm to table. We have
Nice.
cleaning, we have concierge services. We can pretty much do whatever you want, obviously, depending on what you're willing to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, what I want to include, which is my really exciting addition, is arrival by helicopter
Oh, tell me
onto the
more.
farm where you would get picked up by at a local municipal airport. And depending on how many people you have or who's coming from where, you would be dropped on the farm by the helicopter onto our property instead of having to fight traffic or deal with that. They would just pretty much airport to our door, pick you up and drop you off. And that could be also arranged and included in pricing for retreats.
Nice.
Um, what this really makes me excited about, I don't know if probably a lot of people know Yellowstone. One of my
Right.
favorite moments in the
Mm-hmm.
Yellowstone
The
series,
show. Yes.
the show, yes, which is on a ranch in like Montana or something,
Mm-hmm.
is when the ranch owners are going to look for stray cattle and they hop into this helicopter and the helicopter picks them up, starts transporting them over all of the fields so they can see where their loose cattle are and then drops them back down. And I always thought one day I'll have enough land to need a helicopter. But
Amazing.
what's the point of waiting until then to be able to actually enjoy the ride? So that's something that we're just working on contracts with the local company to
That's
roll out for
awesome.
this year.
I love that. I mean, why not, right? I think there's definitely for the right market that's I mean, cool. I'm sure it's less expensive than people might think in their head too, right? I don't assume it's crazy, but there'll be a threshold on that, and I mean, people wouldn't even think that's possible. So I think for the right market, that's awesome. Why not? And this is a good wrap in terms of the themes of buying a business, tax optimization, and of course retreats and general personal growth. So I think on the topic of personal growth, like you need to have very specific mental resilience to execute on what was probably a very stressful process, right? Transitioning from your business, buying the farm, and still running it. So, any maybe last words on just mindset and things that have been very important for you, and that could also segue into like, what are you up to indefinitely here now that you're like, running this operation, and you still do your coaching consulting. So, this might be a good segue to that.
Yes. Mindset wise, I would say, Paul, and I've definitely said this before, the number one thing that took me down, I could say in my last business was going through a period of time where I had such severe anxiety and it was a lot of factors contributing, a lot of lifestyle factors, stress, etc. But I had such severe anxiety that I honestly couldn't do anything.
Mm,
And I had to rely so much on my team to do everything. I was at the point where even reading an email on my phone was like, I just felt like I wasn't physically capable of doing that for a period of time. It was awful. And I remember going to the doctor and they were like, you're stressed, reduce your stress. And I was like, tell me how,
no
help
kidding.
me.
Hmm.
Um, but in that moment, I also realized like what was contributing to this. It took me years to get out of that. And things improved slowly, but it took a really long time. I do see that a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners are approaching their life and their business with the same qualities that I did before that time. And I can just see it's like plane going down. I can see it's going down. I can tell you it's going down, but until you actually come to terms with the fact that like you're either going down or you're going to fix the situation going on in your mind or in your heart, there's going to probably be a catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
So mindset wise, getting things sorted out before you have a really severe event like that would always be my advice and my hope for business owners and entrepreneurs. Because we really, like, if you can't read emails, you can't really do anything for your business.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're really sick and you can't show up at work because you are in massive panic and anxiety attacks all the time, you really got nothing. Like you're stuck, and there's no way that you're growing, and you're probably shrinking your business. And getting out of that is a really tough thing. So I know this is like a very uncomfortable topic, but I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's important. And through that journey, I did a lot of therapy, did a lot of coaching, actually became a mindset coach in three different bodies of work at a master level, which was such an
Mm-hmm.
incredible experience and gave me the
Mm-hmm.
tools to be able to help other people or advise other people to get unstuck in their
Mm-hmm.
lives and their businesses. And it's been such a blessing to see that work out with people getting into healthier relationships and just changing the growth trajectory of their lives because they're sorting out their own mindset, mental stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really helped me to be able to push through hard times, to push through big challenges that you have to look at differently because you're alone on a farm and no one's going to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been definitely a pretty crazy part of life, but it's also been incredible to be able to be alongside other people who are in a similar boat and who I can coach in the process. Right now, my big focus is starting up a tax consultancy business where, I'm just so passionate. I'm so passionate about tax and getting back, whatever the government doesn't need to have of ours. And it's been a passion of my life for quite a long time. I happen to be very good at it, which is great. And where both of those things, passion and ability, intersect is somewhere that I want to be. So trying to work out what that looks like is also part of my journey right now. And figuring out what the niche is something that I'm focused on.
Lovely. Any kind of low-hanging fruit tax tips? I mean, I guess you can't give formal advice when it's not one-on-one. That there, whatever the disclaimer is, put that to the side. What's something you observe that people low-hanging fruit should ask their professional about as a business owner in terms of, we mentioned some things around the tax, of course, with the farm. What about just day to day, year to year tax stuff with property and of course, general right?
Yeah, I'll ask this in question so as to not give any tax advice. Um, I would question if you are a business owner and you have a corporation or you're a business operating out of the head office, which is your home. I would question if leaving your home in a vehicle to go to another place of business or a client's home or a restaurant where you're going to meet a client is in fact a deduction that you could be taking advantage of instead of showing up at, or let me rephrase, if you're going from your home office, which could be your headquarters, to another office or another place of business, versus if a place of business that you work at is an office, half an hour away, where do you start taking your deductions from when it comes to motor vehicle expenses?
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I know that was a roundabout way of explaining this
Mm-hmm.
because I'm also trying to think on my feet about how do I pose this as a question for people to think
Sure.
about rather than tell someone something.
Yeah. No,
Next
that's a great
thing.
one. Yep. Perfect.
If you're showing up at a corporate office, um, what would be in the kitchen? And generally, when I would go to a head office or corporate office, I would normally see snacks, I would see milk, I would see coffee, I would see fruit, I would see waters, I would see Red Bulls, wine, cheese, stuff like that, and a lot of really well stocked corporate kitchens. And I would wonder if you have a home office that is technically your headquarters, why that would not be something that you'd be stocking in your home office headquarters for use
Mm.
during the work hours that you are inputting in your home office.
Oh, very interesting. Keep those Instacart receipts, gentlemen and ladies. That's hilarious. Okay, got
Well,
it.
I think it really relates to morale and it's important during the day, right? Like if we were all working in an office that had a bunch of food, we'd all be in the kitchen.
Yeah, yeah. Great parallel. Makes perfect sense. I mean, you need those, those expensive but quick protein fixes like the protein bars and cottage cheese and all those things, and it's all it's in the spirit of efficiency, right? And those things aren't cheap. So
And they're
good thing to
very,
ponder.
very important for health, for morale, for fueling, mental
Totally,
capacity during the
totally
workday.
interesting. Writing off your groceries, love it. Something that I'm reflecting on there. It might have been a bit more specific than that, but love it. What else? That's cool.
Um, I would say a home office deduction
Yeah.
is something that everybody should be considering.
Yep.
Like, I don't know, Paul, if you're in your home right now,
Sure am.
and if you are taking a home office deduction,
Yep.
and getting into the fullness of that is something that the government is encouraging. Now, when it comes to tax planning, a lot of people get nervous because they're worried about being audited or, something being disallowed. And
Mhm.
if you come at tax from the point of the government is incentivizing us to do things for a specific reason, they want you to take advantage of it if they're offering a deduction or a benefit to it.
Of course. Yeah.
So please just take advantage of it. That's what they actually want you to do. They want people to have home offices.
Yep.
So if you do have one, then make sure that you're correctly taking advantage of it and take notes about everything.
Yep.
Every single thing that you're doing, you need receipts. You need 7 years of them. If you're doing business travel, you need to have agendas, calendar appointments, who you met, where you went. All of those things are really important. The record keeping is probably the most important thing here.
So basically, that's your Google Calendar. Like it's all there. It's not going anywhere. Can I just pop that up if there's an audit in the future and it's all digitally like on my Google
Yeah, if
Calendar?
it's all
Yeah.
in there, if it's all in there, you should be fine.
Yeah.
A bigger question I would have is, are you still going to have the same email address in that many years? If you
Right.
move on from the company that you're working
Fair
for,
enough. Got to be a personal
if
one.
you
Yeah.
sell it, like what happens then?
Yeah. Yeah. Good good note on that. Yeah, no, definitely. That's got to be organized. And we use a QuickBooks app, just take photos of receipts. It's all stored. That usually is kind of a second nature thing for me. Um,
Would it be okay if I challenge you on that for a moment?
yeah, of course. That's why we're here.
What if you get into a fight with the people at QuickBooks because they charge you 10 times more than you should be charged? So you decided to
Right.
delete your subscription.
I would ask about of course a very thorough export of the receipts. I'm sure you can do it on a PDF,
Good idea.
right?
That would be a great idea.
Yeah. I assume that'd be the way to do it, unless you've got any other ideas.
I think that would make sense. I'm just careful about the QuickBooks thing because I found that whenever I was uploading receipts into QuickBooks, I found that things were ended up being more work than if I just had it in a spreadsheet
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, fair enough. There you go. If you got a good system for it, then yeah, why rely on the big corporate overloads? Yep. Yeah, no, that's I mean, those are little things that add up after a while, and there's probably a lot more to dig into once you're in it. So yeah, I'm excited to hear your evolution, right? And I feel like there's a lot of interesting factors of like, yeah, I think a lot of founders do sort of ignore personal finance and just general finance because it's hard and uncomfortable and unfamiliar. And they also neglect their health, as you gave the plane analogy. And those two things, if integrated to your core business and the core thing that's probably causing you stress and joy, I think there's a special way to have work-life integration, and that's a topic for another day. But I think the vibe of retreats and just the way you're designing your life to be able to actually work out of this incredible venue is going to give you a lot of creativity, I mean, it's a great HQ too, if you want to call it that. And, the more people can have these second and third homes for different parts of how they operate their lives and their businesses is actually really important. So I love that you're at the forefront of that. And any last sort of thoughts and takeaways for our business owners?
I would say one thing that if I can impress this
Mm-hmm.
would be the more focused we can be on saving tax, the more money that we have at the end of the day.
Right.
You don't have to work harder. You don't have to work more. You don't have to get a higher multiple on your business sale. You simply can, and we simply can have more money by just focusing on not overpaying the government. So that's been something I always thought about. Like, why would I have to work harder to have more money? I could actually just be smart in tax planning and end up with more dollars in my pocket at the end of the day. And when you take a look at that over an entire lifespan of a really high income earner, that can be millions and millions of dollars left on the table. And I would want every person listening to this to have that in their hand or in their pocket for them, for their family, for their legacy, rather than overpaying the biggest bill you're ever going to have.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And one thing on the lending side I'll say is I just package this up in a way that I'm like, wow, this should be better marketed. Alternative lenders on the mortgage side, they're only really charging sometimes 0.25 higher than a bank. So let's say at time of recording, we've got a 4% or 4.4 at Scotiabank. You can get 4.65 at Equitable Bank, for example, right? Or Home Trust. And yes, they have a lender fee. But overall, like, you could literally save $50K on taxes by doing a significant write-off. And instead you pay the lender a premium of, let's say, $5,000 for that year. So you're getting a 90% discount on your taxes by just going a bit of the unconventional route and understanding what a sorry, ChatGPT is yelling at me right now. That's hilarious. And understanding just the math, right? So, lenders are becoming a lot more aware that entrepreneurs need to optimize tax, and they are giving a lot of benefits to qualifying, still just showing your bank statements versus your tax. They want to see is the money in the bank account. That's the way you would think the banks would do it. But of course, they've got a little arrangement with the government where it doesn't work that way, right? So just off an alternative mindset, alternative lenders, even though the numbers look weird and it's not the convention, yeah, numbers don't lie. So that's a note I'd have on the financing side. And totally, it's all about what's left in your pocket. Everything else is, quite frankly, a vanity metric. So dig deep and have the professionals by your side to make that process fun and easy for you. So keep on keeping.